clear. Durable transformation does not just happen. It occurs, it cannot also occur in isolation. And so industrialization does not just happen, and it does not occur in isolation.
A round of applause to him. I think all the platform, please. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for this. Yeah, I can agree less than what the two speakers, the Honorable Minister for State of Industries and the Excellency has said. But I would define it in a word: revolutionize the industry. That is, industrial revolution is what we need. So manufacturing, manufacturing, manufacturing. Thank you.
Meshioye. One word you said: consistency.
Excellent. Okay, so we started off, so this is a good start, I think. So we'll now let them speak for a little bit more. And I'll start off again with the Honorable Minister. And I've been told, Honorable Minister, that you're about to launch a Nigerian industrial policy. So I think what the audience would like to learn is, what lessons did you take from the past in this new industrial policy? And what are the key things you're doing different in this new policy that will really make a difference for Nigeria's industrialization going forward?
Now that I got a chance to say more than one word, let me commend the effort of the NESG for making industrialization a main matter in this year's summit. And why not? I believe that follows in the lead of what is going on globally, whether it is China organizing the BRICS summit on partnership on the new industrial revolution, whether it is UNIDO organizing a high-level event at the last UNGA that was based on the fourth industrial development decade for Africa, or whether indeed is in our country, Nigeria, where recently with UNIDO, the country signed the first PCP, the Program for Country Partnership. What it is that industrialization is the in thing that is driving global conversations. But like the director UNIDO just mentioned, it's industry and industrialization will not just occur. It will take quite a number of variables. It will take skills. It will take technology. It will take, what do you call it, concerted effort. It's going to take the right policies. It's going to take all of that, to happen. And which is why, talking about what's happening that is different. Earlier on, in an informal conversation with the president of MAN, it's all of this that informed the decision of this government and my decision to start off my tour of duty in industry with convening a meeting where we put together, working with MAN, public and private sector, the Industrial Revolution Work Group in itself, which is a body that is driven by working towards, putting together the right policy, implementation of that right policy, and then the assessment of the results. And I think that it is the product of that that gave rise to what we now have as a national industrial policy, which we have validated. It's not yet a public document because it has to go through quite some series of other things. But I'd like to inform and I'd like to announce that the national industrial policy could have put together will be the first such policy that a country would have in decades. And that for me would be some different way of getting things done. And this policy is a document that puts together all the various concerns, addresses matters about digitalization, matters about finance, matters about technology, and all the associated issues. So what it is that, government alone or the public sector cannot drive this. It's more the public sector, the private sector. And that's why government, the ministry are working with the organized private sector to put all of this together, to identify some number of issues and challenges, and not to go the way, the old way that things have been done before. And let me also inform and announce that beyond the national industrial policy, we also have sub-sectoral policies that we are looking at and that we are addressing. And each of these sub-sectoral policies, whether it is on oil palm, whether it is on dairy, whether it is on cassava, whether it is on CTG, cotton, textiles, garment, each of these is targeted at what? At seeing the extent to which activities in each of these subsectors can be upscaled and can make each of these subsectors competitive enough in order, for example, to respond and to answer to what the demands of industry, would be. I mean, you would recall, everybody in the room, that some months back, Mr. President announced the Nigerian First policy. It may not have been the first of such announcements, because we got executive order 3 and 5 in the past. But I think that what is happening and is going to happen now that is going to be different is that the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, under the industry mandate, is going to now lead that campaign, the campaign for, made in Nigeria goods and services. And what our appreciation of this is that if you lead a successful campaign and introduce, made in Nigeria goods and services as not just an economic, necessity or imperative, but as also a patriotic, matter, that what it has is that on an annual basis, the country is likely going to earn close to 3 trillion naira, because of that. And that, in the short to medium term, the growth of manufacturing is going to be above 20%, employing about 500,000 more Nigerians. And that it's also going to have the effect or the implication of a reduction in not too necessary foreign imports to the extent of about 30% or more. So all of these things, we're trying to do them together in order to give a new vision and a new reality. I mean, I'm glad that, the last figures of the GDP, which indicated the fact that the country's GDP had gone to about 4.2 or so, 4.3%, the first in about 6 years. The drivers of that growth were listed as oil sector and the industrial sector. I mean, it's not oftentimes that you find industry making such headlines, but I think that is also a response to the kind of attention that is currently going on. And we think that the most we'll do is to continue to consolidate on all of this. What we are hoping to achieve is that through this national industrial policy, another subsectoral policy that we're looking at and pursuing is that we're getting the country and our manufacturing sector to be able to respond to various mega trends that are occurring globally. What are those mega trends? The fact of the new emphasis on new energy, the fact of the various world trade shifts, the fact of the various competitions that are going on, and hoping that.
Honorable Minister, can I ask for an example? I think you explained sort of that you want to go in a new direction. The policy is going to be quite a milestone considering that Nigeria hasn't had one for a long time. But if you're saying we're not going to do it the old way, we're going to do it the way, can you give us one example? You mentioned some sectors. What is the old way you're not going to do, and what is the new way?
I mean, at the moment we are engaging. I believe that we're engaging more. I mean, I'd say
I'm hoping for a sneak preview, a little bit of what you want to do. I know you're still launching the policy, but can you
let me give you an example.
Yes.
Recently, the National Economic Council took a decision to, constitute what they call the CTG board. That hasn't existed before. What we're following up with is the fact that we're not just talking about CTG board, talking about, the CTG Development Council. And that is because we've looked back and we've also considered the fact that in the early 70s, the cotton, textile, and the garment industry or subsector, competed almost favorably with the public sector in terms of number of jobs, in terms of what can come in. Can you imagine a country of about 220-something million people having to, look more inwards in terms of, its needs for textile and all of that? We're putting a lot of together. I mean, I didn't stop at that. I mean, I took a multi-city tour of various, textile clusters in Kaduna and in Lagos, speaking with the stakeholders themselves, taking them into consideration in terms of what we're doing, and making sure that the vision and the concentration was together, was one, and we're driving all of this together. I mentioned, for example, the fact that previous administrations have talked about, made in Nigeria, Nigeria first policy and all of that. I mean, we're not stopping at that. We're taking it further, working with procurement departments of government, and making sure that procurements are also targeted in terms of made in Nigeria. I'll give you an example again. One by one, you're going to find in the next couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to also bring in a little bit of the private sector perspective. We also have on the panel at the other side, Jimika. I want to put you on the spot here next. And I want to ask you, you're running a very successful company. And if you're sitting now on the panel with the Honorable Minister who's drafting an industrial policy. From your perspective, working in the food processing sector, what will be the 3 things that you would like to see in that policy? And can you give a concrete example from your own company of why you will be looking for those 3 things?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think the first thing is, to be honest with you, consistency in policy. Operating in Nigeria in a climate where policies change literally overnight is a nightmare for any manufacturer, because it means you can't plan better. It means you can't make decisions. It means you can't look into the future. If you think about it as an investor in the economy, in manufacturing, you invest in a lot of capital, machinery. You invest it for the future. If you put in a plant, for example, that has a capacity to produce 40, 50, 60,000 metric tons, based on policies today that change literally when a new government comes in, then your investment is literally wasted. So consistent in policy, I'll say, would be the first thing. I think the second one is a bit linked to it, but still stand on its own. Again, for help from the government, I'll call it help because that's the only way you can look at this. Is what I call the political will to carry on from where we stopped. Commitment to policies are made at the beginning of every political regime. But the agenda is focused on what the agenda is focused on, not the future for Nigeria. And if you think about it, that means you don't have economic stability, because when you don't have that consistency, you can't plan better, and your economic stability is impacted. If you think about what we've been through in Nigeria over the years, we keep having this ups and downs of inflation and devaluation. You can't rid of it. It's not something we can get rid of, but it's something we can plan around, particularly because we know what the drivers are of those factors. How would government put itself in a space to ensure that it can address those on a long-term basis? There is no economy that is free of devaluation or inflation. Even the most advanced economies also go through that. But what must we do as a nation, given that we are in that? It's the fourth one, that we've been through. To the best of my, when I look at the records of Nigeria and, what has been major economic challenges for Nigeria, we've had 4 major ones. And if you look at what has happened to manufacturers in those 4, manufacturing has been the biggest impacted, where factories are shut down, where investors have left Nigeria. What can we do to ensure that doesn't keep happening? Because it really doesn't set us in the right space. And I think the last one would be coherency, where government bodies talk to each other. so that manufacturers can operate understanding what the rules of the games are. You know, earlier on we were talking about different agencies. You need an approval for something and you have to get 5 approvals for the same thing from one government agency. How does that help you to progress in future? It actually creates frustration in your ability to operate. I would say, so, you know, if I were to summarize, I'll go back and say consistency in policy, irrespective of the political agenda. So you have some level of consistency ongoing. Economic stability, I would say, you know, looking at how, you know, we were talking earlier on about cocoa processing. And I explained to you that we make some products in Ghana and we make some products in Nigeria. We're in ECOWAS, but we don't have an ECOWAS consistent policy that helps the whole region. If we were to be serious about our economic agenda as a region, if you look at what the EU is doing, we should do the same in ECOWAS to strengthen the economies of the members of the states of that. Operating in Ghana and operating in Nigeria is chalk and cheese. And how can we get some consistency out of that, irrespective of the political agenda? So I'll say those are the 3 things that we need to look at.
Thank you very much. Maybe we go to men next. Tumba, I want to ask you first a question that directly comes from this example. So what I'm hearing is that the policies that have been put in place for the cacao sector are now limiting the ability of Cadbury to put value addition into Nigeria and have more of the value addition happen in Nigeria rather than in Ghana. So what does an institution like yours do to make sure that the economy as a whole and the private sector as a whole is growing? Because the policies that protect one part of your membership at the same time hinder the ability of another part of your membership to grow. So I think what we're asking you is, like, as a body like MAN, how do you make sure that we can expand firm entry, that we can expand value addition in Nigeria in a way that is not protecting sectors that are currently dominated by a few large firms?
Thank you very much. I'll look at your questions from 2 points. Number one, what can we do as the institutional association to be sure that the growth of manufacturers maintained, sustained, so that the policy shifts are not really impacting on them? What do we do about that? At the same time, that all the smaller ones that go. I want to look at it from that angle. Okay, fine. Now, what MAN has been doing, we are known as an advocacy group, but we have moved from just being advocacy to trying to provide solution on how things should be done. In the first instance, you know, the policy shift is something that I will have said is a perennial problem over the past decades. And you can see many policies that come reveal the sub-optimization of MDAs at various levels. So the first thing we've tried to do is to push to the government that this MDAs should as one rather than working in silos. Okay, and when they work together as one, then it will be less burdensome on the manufacturer and they can concentrate more on the business. Now, having said that, how do we approach this? Beyond this, what to do is to do data-driven advocacy. We have about 10 sectors and 74 subsectors. Each subsectors are basically working from the conglomerate down to the SMEs. So they have facts as things are happening regarding taxes, regarding exports, their importation, concerning their infrastructure deficiency. So we aggregate this data and we look at the relevant agency that will really work on it. We work in collaboration with our supervising ministry, that's the Ministry of Investment under the Honorable Minister of Industry currently, and we push this across to them. In addition to this, we have publication that speaks to issues and let government know what's really happening. This fact enables us to gain government attention. Unlike before, we've been saying that. So currently we are bringing government to understand prevalent problems as they are with facts and figures. And in most cases, 90% of cases, preferring possible solutions amongst others, which if follows, will erase or eradicate that problems that are prevalent and we can move forward. If you want me to mention some sort of optimization, I can tell you, take for instance, the energy cost. Energy cost in 2022 was about 197.6 billion. In 2024, it rose to 1.1 trillion. That's about 460% increase. Now, what we had at that time, we had government was not listening. So we are gathering this fact to say that you don't do it this way. Then if you look at this energy cost, part of electricity, at a one point, just one shot, there was 200% increase on the cost. If you aggregate this, you're having about 40%, 35 to 40% of total cost of manufacturing goes to energy. What about the access to finance? I'm trying to let you know how this framework works because it is policy that push the framework, okay? Then if you go to access to finance, MRP in the past 4 years or so have been increased about 14 times, yet inflation rate is above 20%. MRP standing at 27% now means the cost of finance is higher, and average cost of finance is between 35 to 37%. Access to affordable finance is critical and is unavoidable. So, and if you look at the import duty that was introduced 4% of FOB charges, if you aggregate all this together, they hinder proper performance of manufacturing sector. And a key point to know there that our credit to GDP is about 17.6% or so. South Africa is about 50%. Malaysia is about 100%, or above 100%. So man is doing what? We are aggregating these facts and looking at what solutions, what could be done to do a turnaround, to change the dynamics. And like I've said, we use data, we have approached. Honorable Minister of State for Industry is there. We are co-working with him very much well, so that interest of conglomerates at one hand, MSME at the other hand, are pushed forward because they have common goals at a point in time. It is profit maximization. They want to be sure that they are able to give returns to all stakeholders, regardless. So we push those to the government, and we engage there in the government constructively, and we are very, very, how will I put it, resilient. We are discouraged, we are undaunted in doing this. And then let me stop that and wait for other questions, so I'll give time to others. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's bring in the ambassador in the room. To bring in a bit of an international perspective, I would like to know what are the most critical policy alignments that Nigeria would need to strengthen to align its industrial policy with the regional commitment to ensure that these industrial policies in the end are in line with objectives of export-oriented growth.
Thank you so much. I think we've been talking far too long, and we've been on the design board far too long, whilst other regions are doing what serves their interests best. The statistics that we have before us is very disturbing. To say that our contribution of industrialization to GDP is less than 10%, and intra-Africa trade is less than 15%, and we export about 79% of raw material is an indictment on us, and especially for a country that is a leading light in the region, West Africa. And I must say that since we became independent, since we started trying to govern ourselves, we have always looked at the economic imperative and have set in train the actions that we have to take to have a different narrative on this matter. And yet we seem to be at the same spot. But to say it bluntly, we seem to be retrogressing at a time when we have the fourth industrial revolution, where machines, Internet of Things are going to run activities, when we have huge populations on our hand, we have employment to give to our youth, we have to change the economic circumstances of our people. And so it's a very solid statement. And we owe it to ourselves to bring about this change. And this change, as I stated earlier, would not come just like that. It would also not occur in isolation. And so what do we need to do? We need to take deliberate actions. Our actions should be coherent and we should coordinate our actions. Since 1980s, when we had the Lagos Plan of Action, if you read the documents, they are the same things we've said we should do to change the narrative, and yet we stand at the same spot. When you come to the region, ECOWAS has policies that are good enough to make us succeed together. We have the CET, Common External Tariffs, we have the ETLS, we have the protocols, free movement of goods and persons. We have policies such as the regional competitive policy. We have the regional investment policy. We have programs that we have rolled out for standards, quality infrastructure, and also market access and coordination. We even have, President talked about electricity generation. We even have the West African power pool. All these policies are there. And so there is a necessity for us to align national policies to these regional policies. And more importantly, we need to implement them. Certainly, there are gains and pains in industrialization. There are gains and pains in international trade. But then it depends on a deliberate policy, national policy, tied to these international frameworks to ensure that we lessen the pains and elevate the benefits to be derived therefrom. And I must say it clearly, we have many international organizations helping you. UNEDO is helping you with technical capacity, action-oriented research, advisory services, and so on and so forth. But to achieve a change, a positive change that we all require in this sector, we need to be deliberate, we need to be coherent, we need to coordinate action. It cannot be said that in the same country where we seek to advance industrialization, we have policies that clash against each other, policies that undermine each other. We have to follow the lead of what the Ministry of the Honorable Minister for State for Industry is doing to, for the first time, let us have a very solid industrial policy for this country. And this industrial policy should be aligned to the West African Common Industrial Policy so that we'll be able to achieve much results. And beyond that, we need to have sectorial policies aligned to the industrial policy. Having said all this, going back from the beginning, we can have all these policies lined up, but if we allow implementation paralysis, I think if you sign on to the policy, you'd have to implement it. It's your commitment. You'd have to ensure that internal rules are consistent with the policies that you've signed on to. Let me just say one thing without being very specific. If we talk about the potentials that Nigeria has to process cocoa, it's enormous. And so, and as we've been told right here, Cadbury is processing cocoa here in this country. Ghana produces cocoa, Cote d'Ivoire produces cocoa. In the entire region, this is the hub that cocoa is processed. If we have a policy that enables the countries that produce to bring their cocoa here easily, to be processed for our consumption and for external export, we would be adding on to industrialization within the region. And so if we have policies that make it difficult for goods to move, or intermediary goods to move from one part of the region to the other, then we are not serving our interests. In any case, the value that will be added on processing of cocoa in this country would be the benefit to the country and to the region as a whole. Again, if you look at this country, let us talk about primary produce, such as even yam. Yam is produced much more in this country than the country that exports yam in the region, much more than any in this country. Why is that so? It's issues of standards, packaging, ensuring that the requirements that international standards that are required are upheld. If we are able to follow what we have, the West African competitiveness program, and follow it carefully, ensure that we have coherent, accurate testing, certification, and so on and so forth. It shouldn't be said that any other country within the region should export yams better than Nigeria. And so what I'm saying is that we should try to harmonize our policies, the regional policies. And even though there are pains and gains, the gains in regional integration is much more than the pains that are to be derived therefrom.
Thank you very much. Oyeyimika, we're talking about something that affects your industry and your firm specifically. Do you want to add on to the example that was given on cocoa?
Yes, I think for cocoa, for me actually, I actually look at Nigeria differently on the cocoa side, and I say, why is Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana two of the biggest cocoa producers in the world, and Nigeria isn't anymore? Nigeria used to be many years ago. We had a cocoa board. I know the government has tried to resuscitate the cocoa board. But if you look at the benefits that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are making, and today we're talking about non-oil exports and how do we get bigger in non-oil exports, I think it's a no-brainer that we need to really shape up our cocoa industry. We process cocoa beans. We export cocoa butter. Nigeria doesn't use that much cocoa butter. A lot of it is exported because it's used either for cosmetics or for chocolates. And as a global company, the cocoa butter is useful for us internationally anyway. So the question is, Ghana also has cocoa processing, by the way, and so does Cote d'Ivoire. How can we make cocoa bigger in Nigeria? For me, it's just one commodity that is globally traded today. Cocoa price is, the comment is cocoa is almost as expensive as gold. That's the reality. If you go and look at the global trade market, you see the price of cocoa there, you'll be amazed. This is on a jewel that we have arable land, we have all that it takes to make this commodity a big one for Nigeria. And my challenge to our country is, how can we make that big? I do know the benefits of cocoa because I work in the industry, and I know that if Nigeria can make it, there are 5 big cocoa producers in the world. They control everything. And what's stopping us?
Very much. I think it's time to go back to the Honorable Minister. So I think there were a few ingredients that I heard for the industrial policy of Nigeria. So one is around coherence. And now that they're on the panel, they're polite. But when we were talking before, there was a frustration with different government agencies that I've not only heard from these panelists, but also talking to other private sectors. There's multiple inspectors. There's a flurry of people that will come to you. Why can't it be that one agency comes to you, collects all the data, and makes the interface with government easier while you ensure quality compliance and the required needs to make sure that our products are safe in Nigeria? So I think that's one thing. Like, do we try to tackle this issue of policy incoherence and incoherence in implementation that makes it very hard to operate in Nigeria in the policy? Secondly, I was hearing a lot around from the ambassador around Nigeria's commitment to regional trade policies. And these commitments have already been made. And recently there was also the announcement that over the next 10 years, Nigeria is phasing out all these, what they call like additional tariffs on top of the commonly agreed external tariff. So in that context, how is your policy and your vision for Nigeria's industry addressing these issues around policy incoherence, implementation incoherence, and how is it placed into this broader framework of Nigeria's commitment to phase out these additional tariffs and bans?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, it's the matters about various regulatory bottlenecks, and all of that continue to affect business, manufacturing industry. I mean, are continuing matters, and I think that very reasonably they are continually being addressed, being looked at. I mean, you would appreciate that we have what we call PEBEC. PEBEC is the Presidential Ease of Doing Business, committee, which regularly. I mean, I give you an example. Back in the ministry, in the last couple of weeks, there's been some back and forth between PEBEC, the Standards Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, and all such agencies, with PEBEC insisting that some of the regulatory, work of SON needed to be left, for NAFDAC. I mean, that is continually being, taking place. And I need to assure that government has a commitment to reduce a lot of these bottlenecks and these, inconsistencies. Let me also say that, at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about the Industrial Revolution Work Group. In itself, that work group is not just about me. Yes, I chair the work group. The president of MAN is co-chairing it. And it has membership cutting across different government agencies and ministries. The idea is that as we make success over this work group, that is the extent to which we're able to reconcile and to resolve a lot of these issues that have continued to bedevil industry and manufacturing. We broken into different thematic groups that tries to respond to some of these concerns and challenges, whether it's that of affordable long-term finance, whether it's in terms of energy, whether it's in terms of regulatory, whether it's in terms of skill and human development. All of these things have been, the idea is that it's a one-stop shop that tries to respond and to resolve issues that emanate from industry and from manufacturing. So all that is continuously going on. Now, I mean, and I listened to the director, UNIDO, and, speaking to the question you asked about how Nigeria is able to reconcile and resolve its internal dynamics in terms of national industrial policies, vis-a-vis, its commitment to the sub-region and to the region and all of that. Let me just state very clearly that the national industrial policy for us is our own strategy, right? I mean, it's our own strategy, but this strategy only makes sense to us to the extent that it's coordinated and is aligned, to what Nigeria's commitments are, in not just Africa, but more in Africa. I'll give you an example, the AFCFTA, and all of that. Nigeria is, it's a lead player, in this regard, and Nigeria is a champion. And, most of what we, doing in terms of the policy, to the extent that, it's not inconsistent with what our obligations and commitments are, make that a problem. So we are conscious of this. We're conscious of the fact that if it's fragmented and it's not aligned, it affects not just our own goals industrially, but the goals of the region. What are those goals? Our goals would, for example, dictate that we need to see how much we can become, a player in terms of the export of finished goods than just raw materials. And that has to take place within that mix of the AFCFTA, because when other they deal with us better to the extent that they have a market that's about 1.5 billion and not just a market that's about 200 and something million people. So we're conscious of that. And I think that, alignment with, the other policies, let's say FCFTA and our commitments, for us is not optional. In itself, it's an imperative really. And we work, dutifully to ensure that that alignment is done. Because if you look at what we're talking about, the national industrial policy would speak about things about investment. We are concerned with the circumstances and the situation with our MSMEs, right? And we think that, it makes our MSMEs will make sense and record the kind of progress and achievements for country. If we say that we have close to about 40 million, it's not just about the number, but the impact. And what it is that as we align with the AFCFTA, requirements and principles, it means that we need to make sure we scale up our production in terms of quality in order to be competitive. So whatever we do is based on how innovative that we get as country, how competitive, but this innovativeness and competitiveness is within the mix of our engagement at the regional level, not just internally.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
I try to ask men, but in a way, this question should be directed to you. Because your mandate is not only to represent manufacturing, your mandate is to make the industry grow as much as possible for Nigerians to flourish. So one of the things that we see in a lot of industrial sectors in Nigeria is that the sectors are have a few large players in it and not a lot of medium-sized and other firms and entry. So the man is representing those that are already in the sector. Your mandate is to make the Nigerian economy grow. So when you prepare the industrial policy, you mentioned already you're partnering with men, but in a way you also need to represent and think of the new emerging firms, the medium-sized firms that might be able to grow a lot. And the benefit of a more dynamic sector across all sectors in Nigeria obviously is going to be that you have more jobs and lower prices for Nigerian consumers and the rest of the world. So how do you make sure in preparing the policy that you don't end up by accident voicing the views of those that already exist, which we need to look at, but how do we also make sure that there's new entry, that there's expansion, that there's more dynamism in different sectors so that the Nigerian economy becomes more competitive as a whole?
Yeah, thanks. I mentioned man just incidentally and not because we're just relating or dealing with man alone.
He's on the stage.
In that room, we have Nasmi, we have, Nasi, we have Nasima, we have all of these players. And all of these players cater for, the cadre of enterprises that you're talking about. So all of these have their voices, being heard and being mentioned, because in real fact, the growth of our economy is going to depend more on how well our MSMEs thrive, and not just in terms of what the manufacturers do. And we've gone further, and I can report this, that, consistently, the numbers about 40 million MSMEs and all that has continued to make its rounds. Two things that we're trying to pioneer. One is that we are deliberately trying to make sure we get the actual numbers and identification of these MSMEs. Because all the time, there are abundant government interventions, but we don't have a way of measuring what the results are. So we need to get to a point in which we're able to measure that because of intervention A and B, a medium enterprise has been able to scale up to a small and all of that. That is going on. The other thing is that working with the AFDB for the first time, under what we call the MSME, industrial cluster program, in order to see how we can assist and enable these MSMEs through the different industrial clusters to become more and more productive. So all in all, it is important, to again indicate government's commitment that we're not just, when the president at the beginning of the administration did an intervention of 200 billion, for, industry and all of that. It didn't just target manufacturers alone. There's also a component, 75 billion for the medium, small enterprises and all of that. Because there is a recognition, again, like I've stated, that those who provide the jobs, the most jobs are actually provided by the MSMEs. Those who are going to be the catalyst for economic growth and industrial progress are actually those MSMEs. So they are not missing in the room. They are part of what we're talking about, and we're going to continue to work with them.
Excellent, thank you. Let me go back to Otumba.
Yes, please.
What is MAN doing to make sure that in your advocacy and policies, you're also creating the policy space for the MSMEs to grow?
Thank you. Like I said during my first discussion, you have sectorial groups and subsectors. The essence of this is to be sure we are able to get closer to our members. And most of these members, like it's been all we know these numbers, MSMEs are slightly numbers than conglomerates. So we try to identify their needs. And we are canvassing to the government that, just like alluding to what the Honorable Minister of State for Industry have said, have clusters for them. In addition to having cluster, do it in a way that they will be incubated and nurtured in a manner that they will grow. And in MAN, we are trying to we are working assiduously and we'll be trying to give linkage, to create linkage between the MSMEs and the conglomerate as a feeder. In advocacy, their needs are brought forward. And in advocacy, we do in MAN, it's not just about talking about the issue. At times we go to sector specific, like automobile, like food and beverages, like plastics, like all of them. We'll go to that and bring this case to the government with possible solutions. Now, we do something, because when you're talking of SMEs, you'll be looking at 2-3 things. Market, we are defeating. And let me take it to 2. The institution. Institution in this context, I will make it like financial institution, international institution support for them to grow. At MAN, we have an arm that assists MSMEs to access funds that are affordable, giving affordability in the context of what is prevalent now, not necessarily what is ought to be affordable. We even support them in creating documentation, align them with what to make them to be credit bankable, having bankable projects and access a fund that government makes available. So we are doing this. And we engage the ministry to let them know their needs. So, and we have at the council level, we have a dedicated vice president that look after MSME, ensuring that across the country, they aggregate representative and understand their needs, which are now presented to the government. All this makes them to be more, despite the fact that they have our own organization, the MSMEs in manufacturers, associations, are comfortable assisting with us. And I found so many MSMEs across my visitation to seminars and things who are willing to get on board to become manufacturers. But the only criteria is that if you want to become a member of MAN, you must be able to have what I would call standardized products that is acceptable, because you must be a member of SON, You must be able to get your NAFDAC, get all those regulatory requirements that will make you become a good manufacturer producing standard products. Besides that, and our entry level is very easy so that they can come easily. So we are very accommodating and doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap up and we're going to end like we started with a single word or a single sentence. And I'm now going to ask you to complete my sentence, and I'm going to start from the end and then work back to the Honorable Minister. Oyeyimika, I'm going to put you on the spot first. I'm asking you to end my sentence. A coherent path forward for Nigeria's industrialization must include.
I'll keep to my consistent policy that outlives political agendas.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. I'll just take one more point there. One, eliminate sub-optimization of MDAs. It is very hurtful and it's not good for the economy. And
it's
let me
just one.
One.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's crucial for me. When you do that, I think I'm fine. I'm good. I'm home and dry. Thank you.
Clear. Ambassador.
It should be aligned to regional frameworks. It should be well coordinated nationally and also coherent.
Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Attention and emphasis on outcomes than just output. And in that regard, the measure of our success will be the number of industries that are enabled, will be the number of jobs that are created, and all of this in totality. So with less emphasis on output and more emphasis on outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna pick my own, and I'm gonna take a bit more than one sentence because I'm also allowed as the moderator to wrap up. So it's one word, 3 sentences. So I think the word that I heard most from this panel is coherence, and I think that's coherence in 3 main ways. One, what we clearly heard is coherence between both the policies and the implementation between different MDAs that face the private sector. And this is something that I know DG Pebek and others are working on, but there's a big demand for it. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen yesterday. It means use technology. One agency interfaces government, not 4 or 5 asking the same information. Getting rid of steps that are not necessary, like things like pre-shipment inspections. Why is this here? Like there's a lot of things still in Nigeria's system that interface with the private sector without adding value in terms of quality assurance and control. So I think that's one in terms of coherence. The second in terms of coherence is the coherence between Nigeria's policies and the international commitment it's made, and the realization that those international commitments made before make sense for Nigeria and should be implemented and committed to with urgency. The example was clear from today's panel. The additional tariffs put on top of what we agreed as common external tariffs are hurting the ability of Nigerian manufacturers to diversify their processing, to add more jobs in Nigeria. So we have to believe in the competitiveness of Nigeria and actually implement those commitments that we made a while ago and be coherent about it and be ready for their implementation. I think the third bit of coherence is around, it can't be that policies are only benefiting a few firms. We have to make sure that
immediately after this session, which is over, they'll be stepping down now. We'll be having 2 special sessions. One will be holding at the Lagos Ocean Hall, and it will be on public asset management, building a framework to attract sustainable investment. That'll be Lagos Osun Hall. The second special session will be on actualizing tax and fiscal reforms implication for businesses. That will be holding here. Some of the panelists for that, I can see them in the room. That will be holding here. Then we'll have 5 design workshops in different rooms in the hotel. So you can choose to be in any of them. If you want the one for tax, you remain here. And if you want the one on public asset management, building framework to attract sustainable investments, that'll be on Lagos Osun Room. Besides the special sessions, we have 5 design workshops. 5 design workshops. So if you're interested in public asset management, you can start going to Lagos Osun Room now. But if you're interested in tax,